So, a fun little fact about me, if anyone cares to know, when I was growing up between the ages of 8 to honestly 15, I tried to watch the goriest, the bloodiest, the most disturbing shit that I could find. Basically, I just wanted to be as edgy as I could. The issue with that is that because at such an early age I watched so much messed up stuff, that now as an adult I really don't get bothered by what a lot of people would be like, that makes me want to throw up. So to actually find episodes that disturb me anymore is actually a rare thing, especially within anime. Because it's usually focused on, when we get the graphic, it's like, look, a head came off and look at the blood squirting. It's like, to me, that does nothing to me. It can look cool, but it doesn't disturb me. So this episode of Vinland Saga, I'm going to say right now, it disturbed me, and that's why I'm so impressed, because they did something that I don't think a lot of anime and just series in general aim to do. This episode was gory. They highlighted the bodies, they highlighted what happened, but in the moments of slaughtering a village with a single girl looking at her family, her neighbors, being slaughtered by these monsters, they focused on the eyes. And sometimes the backs as the axes came down, some blood was squirting, but for the most part it was focused on the eyes. The eyes are considered the window to the soul, as people like to put it. That's where emotions come out, and great eye contact can really tell you a lot. And to just see the priest to the girl to the soldiers, that was disturbing. And then when the mist was going away and you saw bodies of mothers holding their children, and just, that's how you do gore. That's how you do messed up things. And I don't know if the manga was really highlighting just axes going into heads, or if it was a page for page, but for me, this is what I like to see, because I am so desensitized to most gore that it just doesn't bother me. And this did, and that's why I love it, because it really, really highlights how disturbing the Viking era truly was. There's no consideration, and even though Askeladd presents it as consideration as well, I need all this food, there's no way I can leave you half, but I don't want you to starve either, so I'm going to give you mercy killing. I'm sure in his mind, and maybe even in his people's mind, that's actually a pretty generous offer. You're not going to let them starve and basically watch their family die, but at the end of the day, they're forcing this upon them with no second thought. This era is absolutely brutal, and I'm so glad to see Vinland Saga really highlight just how bad the Viking era was, and how we might love a character like Askeladd for being so scummy, so manipulative, but he has times where he smiles and you get charmed by him, but then there's other times where you see who he truly is when he needs food for his men, and saying, well, this is the prince's best chance at survival. This definitely was probably the most impactful episode of Vinland Saga to date, and you can tell the series is just getting started. I really appreciate just the build-up and just the religious undertones in this episode. I mean, the episode kicks off with, once again, what is love? Really, the soldiers are kind of confused, talking hey, this brotherly love, is that what we're discussing? And yeah, that might be a form of love, but that's not what the priest actually wants. And when you hear of Tor's name and just reactions, it's kind of insane to see just what this episode was setting up to then what we ultimately got by the end, especially because this is a family who was heavily discussing God, saying, yeah, the world's going to be coming to an end, but that's why we pray, so we can all go to heaven together. And it's so interesting that you have this girl, Anne, who stole a ring from a market, and she's feeling quite guilty, as if, all my family's going to go up to heaven and I'm going to be cursed to hell. I should throw away the ring, but it looks so great. It's super interesting how the build-up, we knew it was coming. We've seen what they do to villages. It was very clear that all, if not most, would be killed, slaughtered, raped. There's a lot of things that could happen. And to see her have to watch her family, who was presented as a very religious and, for all we know, pretty good group of people. They had their beliefs, they had what they thought was good and just, and maybe they weren't without their own sins, but they felt like they were fine people. And you have a girl who's contemplating, is this ring going to doom me to eternal hell? And she's forced to watch her family, her neighbors, her friends, everyone she knows and cares about get slaughtered before her eyes, and she's forced to be the lone survivor. She can't even die in the snow, she wakes up. Now, based on the end of the episode, it definitely feels like she kind of had this awakening for her religion. It kind of feels like, she sees clearly about the truth of the world and what her family was always saying. So I do think that she's going to, just based on my own impressions anyway, that she's going to be very heavily influenced in religion even more than she already was. But at the same time, this kind of feels like her hell. Literally, she was contemplating, is this ring going to doom me to hell? And as her family gets slaughtered, yes, they were killed, But for her beliefs and what she was raised on, they should be up in the sky in eternal paradise, but she's not able to go with them. It's super interesting, the symbolism in religion in this show and how we're following Vikings, right? They have every disregard to everything that's been taught with religion about, being a good person. They can go against every single rule that a girl like her was raised on and not even be scared of the face of death. It's so crazy to watch the contrasting viewpoints and opinions from just basic topics such as love to religion and see how polar opposite they are for our central characters. Because typically, a main character in a show like Vinland Saga would be Anne, would be someone like that. The evil Vikings, the bad Vikings, let's have a just character, yet we have a character, Thorfinn, who is now a part of this vile group specifically for the reason of wanting to get duels in the hope that one day he could avenge his father. But in the process of getting there, he's also turning into this. Like, if you remember the very first village that he tried to warn that mother and daughter, ultimately what happened? He just stood there and changed his expression from worried to just a Viking. Someone who accepts that mother and daughter, they're probably going to get raped, they're going to get killed. This is what's going to happen for his quest. Like, this world and its transformation for its characters is simply phenomenal. I really adore how brutal it was. The reactions in this episode were top notch. There was a lot of disturbing shots. There was some crazy funny shots, but just the natural transition to get to where we ultimately ended up by the end of the episode. I can understand. I believe it was the mangaka was hyping this episode up, or someone very close to the source material, and I can understand why. This shit's insane, and I really love the production to this episode. This was a very cold and very hard to look at episode, not even just with the gore, but it was mostly due to the storm coming in. There was a lot of dark lit shots and you couldn't really tell. Like, you knew it was Ashley, you knew it was these characters, but the snow was blowing in so hard that it was very hard to keep track of what was going on, and it ultimately reinforced why this was the decision they made. Because if this was spring, maybe they would have just took their food and left, because they could get more food, they could survive. But for Ashlad and company's mentality, this is winter. Like, they might not even survive the trip back home, let alone a village who has no food as far as the eye can see. So for them, kill them, that's mercy in their eyes. Even though for most logical people, this is vile and cruel. And the fact that they really go into this vile and cruel mentality and really reinforce just how brutal the era of Vikings is what I love about Vinland Saga. It doesn't shy away from the disturbing. It really highlights that this isn't a pretty time period, this isn't a pretty set of characters, and as characters get more and more comfortable with this lifestyle, the further off the deep end they become, and how it's impossible for someone like Thorfinn to go back to that innocent kid who thought warriors were great. He's too far gone, and I don't think he could ever come back. That's what's fantastic about this cast of characters, and why characters such as Ashlad are so complex and just super interesting. I still say Ashlad is my favorite character currently in this show, but I don't, shy away from the fact that he's horrible. Like, look at what he does. Look at what he leads his men to do, and how in the face of families eating, their men will just be like, the food's mine. Give it to me or I'll stab you in the eye in front of your family. Like, that's what's so great about Vinland Saga, is it's so complex, it's so diverse, and just the world and its story is always bigger than one family eating dinner or a battle of the season or this year. It's always so much more, and at any point a character like Anne could be a central focal character. Like, that's what's fantastic, is that a good story, a really good story that wants to be vast and epic, will have so many characters' perspectives that even a little girl kind of deciding, am I going to hell for stealing a ring? She could become important, or she could just be left, we never see her again. Every character can become something in this world, and is bigger than just Thorfinn or Ashlad or any of these characters. Anyone can die and anyone can be interesting, because the world, for as brutal as it's always been, it's interesting, and that's why stories are heavily based on historical events and things like that, because even though living throughout those times is absolutely just horrifying, you can make a memorable series by taking those horrifying elements and creating a really gripping narrative. Simply brilliant episode, probably the best episode of Vinland Saga, or definitely up there, maybe tied with the best episode. Fantastic episode overall, production on point, voice acting on point, and just the little details from just cracks on their hands and how frozen and just really poor these characters were, or how cold they were. This is the type of production you'd love to see in anime, and I'm so glad to see Vinland Saga continuing to excel and I hope it continues in its final core for the first season. I always just love it when anime understands that if their characters are going to be in the snow, that naturally their body should be reacting to the snow, which I rarely see when snow is presented in anime. You see the frost maybe on their lips, things like that, but to actually see cracked hands, frozen hands as if they are getting frostbite, and just the natural body language that I know what happens with snow. I live in Canada, I know what to expect with that shit, especially in very cold weather. It's just nice to see what they're actually doing here. It's just the little production details that really tie this episode, this series together. We can look at the action scenes and they're fantastic. We already know that. But those little details of body language and just what's happening naturally to their bodies as they traverse the new lands and the struggles that will come with it, it's fantastic. It's like if you saw characters walking through a desert, you should naturally expect them to be pouring buckets of water out of their skin for how hot they are and how exhausted. So it's nice to see that translate to a winter wonderland scene, and not much of a wonderland, but it definitely was in some cases. It's just simply fantastic to see the visuals in this show, and I know I'm not alone feeling that for sure. Let me know what everyone thought down in that comment section below. Do you love it? Do you hate? Your favorite moment? Whatever you feel, let me know. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy, and also hit that subscribe button if you have any news. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.